Welcome to the second session on Swar Studio, Swar System, Digital Audio Workstation. In the first session, we have covered the basic ground about DAW and how to create a simple song with a few audio tracks. And in this course, we are going to mainly focus on MIDI. So obviously, the first question that comes to mind is, what is MIDI? MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, but I doubt many musicians even know that meaning. In short, MIDI is a lightweight language that is used by music hardware and software to communicate between each other. It was formalized in the early 1980s as a way of standard connection between the different music equipments. The beauty of MIDI is its lightness and simplicity. It basically describes the exact action of a player over a keyboard, mainly the notes on and notes off events, but also the strength of which they were pressed and their length. It also records the state of modulators like pitch wheel over time. At this point, no sound is yet involved, only a description of a performance. It is then up to the receiving sampler or synthesizer to translate those events into actual sounds. This makes MIDI extremely flexible because you can play the same MIDI files with any type of voice you select in the synthesizer. Now a word about these synthesizers. By definition, they are hardware or software modules that transform MIDI events into actual sound, so they can be referred to as virtual instruments. A special type of synthesizer that use real audio recordings for that sound generation are called as sampler or rompler. Swar Studio includes many such virtual instruments by default, so you can play them out of the box without the need to purchase additional ones or hire live musician. You can also load third-party one as well. Now that we have explained MIDI and synths, we can see how this is available in Swar Studio. MIDI tracks in Swar Studio are referred to as instrument tracks. You can create them as both mono or stereo through the file menu or the specific icons on the toolbar. Once an instrument track is created, it is automatically set to a default sound engine, in this case, tabla. However, clicking on an instrument drop-down will show a list of available sound engines. Select an instrument in that list will play any MIDI in that track with the sound of that instrument. Swar Studio comes with a large range of built-in sound engines, both for Western and Indian instruments, which means you can create convincing fusion songs without the need of purchasing additional virtual instruments or hiring live musicians. The included instruments are shown here. This said, Swar Studio, like any other DAW, allows for additional synth to be added. We will see how to do that in course 3, since we already have a lot of materials to cover in this lesson. What is also great about Swar Studio is that it is not only includes this large range of sound engines, but also lots of clips for all of them that you can use in your compositions, because you may have tabla or drums or virtual instruments, but if you don't know any rhythm for them, your songs won't sound that convincing. You will find the loops in the library sections of the DAW. You can open that by selecting View, Library, or clicking on the library icon on the toolbar. The library pane is a great tool to audition the included loops before deciding which one to use in our song. We will see here two drop-downs. The first one lists the available loop bases. A base is a set of folders that contain MIDI or audio loops. The second drop-down called Audition With lists the available sound engines. This is thanks to the flexibility of MIDI that lets us play a specific MIDI loop with different sound engines. So here we will be able to choose what sound we want the MIDI to play. For example, we can try playing one of these bass loops with its default voice, bass. you can either click on Audition or press the spacebar. Press Audition button or spacebar again to stop playback. Now what about trying some other voices? Here we can select Guitar Sound Engine. Then we can try with Harmonium, and so on. Now you can select another bass, say tabla. Here we have lots of tabla rhythm we can use in our compositions. Let's play a few of them. We could also change a different sound engine to play them, but this may not have a very reliable output, as rhythmic strokes are matched arbitrarily across different drums. But we could certainly try, say, dholak. Not that great. How about drum loops? You will find here a large collection of drum styles that can be a good base for your songs. One thing to notice is that you can easily double or have the playing speed to try each loop at a different tempo. You will see that the final tempo on your track can be adjusted at wish also. Finally, we have also included a few audio loops for voice. You will find them in the general base, here. Okay, so now that we know how to audition these loops, we are going to drag one onto our track. As we currently have a tabla track, we can go back to a tabla bass and select a tabla loop. We will go for a Kaharwa variety as we want something a little bit folky. This one should do. I now drag it directly on my track and it appears as a new loop with the shape of rectangle. Okay, so now that I have my loop in my track, I can play it and make sure it's the same thing I auditioned. It is, but I would like my song to have a faster tempo. For that, I have two choices. Increase the BPM of the song or sync the loop in my track. BPM stands for beats per minute and is the standard measure for tempo in music. By default, songs are set to a BPM of 120, which means that the DAW will play 120 beats every minute. But you can increase the tempo here. Just note that this will change the tempo for the whole song, not just a single track. The other option is more specific. Instead of changing the global tempo, we are going to condense our loop to play in a smaller number of beats. This is another great advantage of MIDI, that you can stretch it without affecting the least its sound and pitch. So let's say we want the loop to play within 2 beats. We just drag its right border to the left until it snaps on the right sides. There. Now we play it again. And yes, this is more the speed at which we want it to play. But now we only have a single loop. We need lots of instances of this loop to cover the whole song. Fortunately, we don't need to drag each of them the same way. We have a much quicker option we can use, where we can replicate it any number of times. For that, we just right-click our loop, then select repeat and choose the number of times. Let's choose 8 times as a start. But a convenient option lets you add instead of loops to cover the remainder of the track until the end of the song. Done. Now if you play our track, we have a better feel of the rhythm. All loop editing options available for audio loops, which we explained in the first course, also apply for the MIDI loops. You can therefore trim them, split them, group them, delete a range from them, and so on. And of course, you can always use the undo function to roll back any action you did by mistake. Now, using ready-made loops is convenient, but for a song, you will want to create your own melodies and rhythm as well. You may be able to record vocals and some instruments into audio tracks. But what if you don't have access to live musicians? Here, the sound engines included in Swar Studio comes very handy. With a simple MIDI controller, you will be able to play all these instruments on your own and then make any editing you want. This way, you can create rich performance with lots of different voices. The first step for recording MIDI is to connect your MIDI controllers. As explained earlier, a MIDI controller is a device that generates MIDI events. Typically, controllers are keyboards, but you also have more specific controllers like drum pads, MIDI guitar, or MIDI flutes. Once you have connected your controller to the computer, usually on the USB port, you can go in the Tools, Options screen of Swar Studio, and there, in the Active MIDI input box, make sure your MIDI controllers appears and it's checked. You can then close the dialog. Next step is to prepare the MIDI track. Go to the Tracks, add Tracks, Instrument Track menu, and select a stereo track. As the new track appears, you can select the instrument you want to play. Click on the instrument name and select the instrument you want from the list. How about Santur? Okay, now I need to arm my track for recording. This is done by clicking on the round icon here. Once it's selected, I'm able to hear any notes played on the keyboard with the sound of Santur. If I change instrument, say Sarod, the sound changes to that. Alright, now I'm ready to start recording. For that, the only step left is to start playing by pressing on the play button or on the space bar. Here we go. Now I press stop and I see my first MIDI recording appear as a loop. I can easily play it after soloing the track. My melody is okay, but my notes are something a bit off rhythm. If this would be an audio recording, it would be difficult to correct. But as it is pure MIDI, we have a way of easily correcting the positioning of notes. It's called quantization. This is a process that aligns the notes according to specific subdivisions. In this case, I would like my notes to automatically adjust to the closest half of the beat. To do that, I just right-click my loop and select Quantize, then half. I can then play my loop again and see that the notes are more precisely match the rhythm. I can easily try different levels of quantizations on the loop, or even revert to the unquantized version by selecting the off value. Just note that you can apply a default quantizations to all your new MIDI recording by toggling the auto quantize button here and setting a default quantum value. I will set here a 1/16 snapping so that my playing retains a human feel. Alright, so now that we have recorded our first MIDI loop, we can do some specific editing. Swar Studio includes two different MIDI editors, the piano roll editor and the events list one. We will see each of them in details. To enter piano roll view, you can right click on MIDI loop and select piano roll view, or simply double click the loop. The piano roll editor is a standard view that shows a piano keyboard vertically on the left, and the note played appears over time on the area to the right. Further to that, you have an area at the bottom for modulation curves, say pitch, bending, or expression. You also have two different modes that can be selected by clicking on the corresponding button here. The Select Nodes button lets you select notes by either clicking on them or dragging an area around them. You can then move them or delete them. The Add Notes button lets you add new notes when you click on an empty area. In both cases, you can also adjust the velocity of the note by dragging a white line within it, upwards or downwards. Velocity is the starting volume of a note being played. This editor also includes a snap add drop-down that allows you to define the interval at which notes will automatically snap when you move them. This ensures some kind of rhythm is respected, though you don't want to overuse it. On the bottom side of the editor, we see the section for pitch bend and expression curves. These are usually recorded in the loop through modulation on the wheels of a MIDI keyboard. Expression will affect the volume of the loop throughout times. A point at the top of the curve area will play the echoing notes at their full volume, according to their velocity. A point at the bottom of the area will mute any sound. Pitch bend will affect the pitch of the loop throughout the time. Here, the neutral pitch bending is the middle height. A point below that will decrease pitch. Above it will increase pitch. The level of pitch increase will depend on the important parameter called pitch bend range or PBR. PBR is set on the corresponding field in the track header. By default, it is set to 2 semitones, which means the maximum yanking of the modulation wheel will increase pitch by 2 notes, while pulling the wheel to the minimum will decrease pitch by 2 notes. Indian music often requires pitch bending to cover more than 2 semitones, so you can set a higher value in the PBR field for that, say 8. In this case, you can pitch shift your loop by more or less 8 semitones. Alright, so now back to our curve pane. We can also edit that if needed using the same edit modes. Select to select points to be moved or deleted, and add to add new points. The loop editor also has transport controls, so you can play your loops there directly as you edit them. Also, as a reminder, all actions can be undone and redone. Once happy with your changes, press OK and they will be saved. Swar Studio includes a second MIDI editor that is very handy for more experienced users. It's launched by right-clicking on MIDI loop and selecting Events List Editor. This will show you loop MIDI events as a table with the basic information about each MIDI events. First of all, the timing or position of the event in the loop expressed in ticks. Ticks are subdivisions of a quarter note duration, also named as PPQ or pulses per quarter notes. It is very common to have a PPQ of 480, that is 480 ticks per quarter notes. The second column is for MIDI channel of the event. In standard MIDI, each event is assigned to one of 16 available channels. This way you can have separate pitch bending, instrument, etc. on each channel. The third column shows the MIDI event type. As seen before, there are different event types. The most common ones being note on, note off, controller, pitch bend, etc. The final column shows the parameter, if any, of the event. Double-clicking on the event will display its details, and you can then also change them. You can also add new MIDI events manually by clicking the Insert Event button. Or you can delete events by selecting them and pressing on Delete button. One handy functionality of Event List Editor is the filter option. Here you can select the items you want to hide and then they will be removed from the list. This gives you a much clearer picture of your files and also allows you to handle multiple events at a time. Like if you want to delete all events on channel 2, you can click on channels, hide all but 2, then you can repeatedly click on delete until you have none left in your list. Once you're happy with your additions, you can click OK to save them or click cancel to leave the loop unchanged. These are the two default MIDI editors of Swar Studio, but if you are used to your own and want to use that instead, you should be able to by going into the Tools, Options, External Tools, then click on Browse button in the MIDI Loops Editor field and select your custom program. Once you confirm that, it should launch automatically when you double click on MIDI loop. Alright, so this brings us to the end of this second course on Swar Studio. In this course, we have learned about MIDI, about creating MIDI tracks, recording MIDI, editing MIDI loops, using the library pane, and using the built-in sound engines. We should now have all the tools required to create compelling compositions using both audio and MIDI tracks. But there is still some important functionality you need to know in order to create professionally sounding songs. We will cover that in our next course for advanced users. You shouldn't miss that. Take care. Cheers.